does it make sense to separate them? Now, Microsoft's probably an easy example, but there's lots of examples where it's not quite so simple. General Electric, has anyone ever bought from General Electric before and signed the contract and dealt with those guys? P for pain. It's just miserable because they've got so many different divisions that really don't talk to each other. So I may have a master service agreement with this part of GE. This part of GE comes to sell me something and they have no idea who I am. And so there's just like totally different nuances you have to deal with. So what's that? Yeah, the business units are effectively separate companies at the end of the day. They have a P&L they roll up to, but beyond that, nothing. So how's it working? And I say usually not very well at all. Does anyone have master data management people in their companies? People with the title master data management? Jose, you guys used to. You don't have them anymore? You used to have Amber over in sales and S&D?
I mean, we have, for SAP, we have like a data owner, master data.
Yeah, that's effectively them, right? So in theory, one person gets to go in and create a new customer. If we want to create a new address, a new vendor, there is a person that gets to go create a new vendor. That simplifies it, but ultimately you need the business processes around it to own it. That ends up being a big challenge, and it usually ends up being an area that we have a lot of fights on. Ultimately, the challenges are in this one is that it's a lot harder than people think it should be, because when we talk about it, everyone's like, yeah, just make sure you don't put in the vendor name in twice. It's not that big of a deal. But when you got 10,000 vendors, it is a big deal. And when they've got international subsidiaries and when they've got other things, it does become a challenge. So when we start talking about master data management, it kind of feeds into the reference of master data as a separate group. And we'll talk about that next time if we have the opportunity. Whoops. And apparently there you go, conclusion. Yeah. So I'm going to run through my conclusion real quick in my waning seconds here. What did we learn? Hopefully that we need another session. Did you guys find this topic interesting? Honestly, is it interesting to talk about these things which really may not be BI specific and maybe only tangentially associated with it, but it is something that would be curious to go over again? Okay. Then let's make sure we continue on this and cover it. We may talk a little bit about how to set up a data governance model in the future, if that has any interest. I want to talk, kind of gauge if there's any value there. We've got at least one more session, maybe two, so we can have that discussion later. What should we have learned? The main thing is I wanted to make sure everyone's clear on is this is a people problem first and a technology problem second. If you focus on it from the perspective of what software can we buy, what can we implement to fix our data governance problems, you're never going to be successful. We can talk a little bit about who should be in charge and how you manage it, but that's, again, somewhat secondary. How can we keep talking? I would encourage us to, like I said, have another follow-up on this, but that won't be for at least 3 months, which is a really long time. So I'd encourage you to get the cards to the people around you and talk to folks. Ask dumb questions. Connect on LinkedIn. There is actually a data governance group on LinkedIn that's not totally horrible, but it's just really quiet. So ask questions and get people out there and start thinking about these things. As BI practitioners, we're profoundly interested in a successful data governance, even if we don't own it. But we have to be engaged in order to help them get there. What topics? We'll talk a little bit more next time as we get into what the next parts of the wheel of cheese we want to talk about. And if anyone's awake, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate your input and perspective. All right, thank you. Thanks.